Most strange encounters are said to happen deep in the woods or far away from civilization, but sometimes the most unsettling things happen much closer to home. Tonight we're looking at 3 disturbing stories that began in ordinary neighborhoods and quickly turned into something much stranger. If you enjoy unsettling stories like these, consider subscribing. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The shops no one ever goes into. I'm posting this because I honestly don't know what to make of it, and I'm starting to feel like I'm the only one who notices how strange this is. Maybe someone here has seen something like this before. I moved into the suburb about 2 years ago. It's the kind of place that's pretty quiet, families, schools, a few small parks, and one main street with most of the businesses. You know, the type of place, a bakery, a cafe, a hardware store, a couple of little clothing shops, nothing unusual. For the first year, everything felt completely normal. Then, about 8 months ago, a new shop opened on the main street. That, by itself, wasn't weird, of course. Businesses open all the time. But the store was hard to understand. The sign above the door said, "General Supply." That was it. No logo, no description, no pictures in the window, just plain black letters on a white sign. I remember slowing down when I drove past it because I was trying to figure out what kind of store it actually was. Through the window I could see shelves, but couldn't really tell what was on them. It almost looked like empty boxes or containers. At first I assumed it was some kind of office supply store or storage business, but the weird part was I never saw anyone go inside, not once. I drive down that street almost every day, morning, afternoon, sometimes late evening. The lights inside the shop were always on, but the door was always closed, and there were never any customers. After a while, I kind of stopped thinking about it. Then, about 3 months later, another store opened a few doors down. A plain sign. This one said, "Office Services." Again, no products in the window, no advertisements, nothing that explained what the business actually did. Just shelves inside and bright lights. At the point I remember thinking it was strange that 2 businesses like that would open so close to each other. But the really odd part was the same as before, no customers. I started paying more attention after that. Weeks would go by, and I passed those stores almost every day. The lights were always on, but the doors were never open. I never saw anyone enter or leave. Then something else started happening. More of these stores began appearing. One opened where the old flower shop used to be. Another replaced a small electronical store. And every single one looked the same. Plain sight, fake names, empty windows, and lights on all the time. After a while, I mentioned it to a coworker during lunch. I asked him if he had noticed those new stores on Main Street. He just shrugged and said something like, "Probably storage units or office or something." But that didn't make much sense to me. Why would a storage company need a storefront in the business part of town? And if they were offices, why were the lights on all night? A few weeks ago something happened that made the whole thing feel even stranger. I was walking home late that one night after grabbing food from a place a few blocks away. It was around midnight, maybe a little later. The street was pretty empty, except for the street lights and the glow coming off those shop windows. As I passed one of the shops, I happened to glance inside, and for the first time I saw people in there. But they weren't shopping, they weren't talking either. They were just standing there, completely still. There were maybe 5 or 6 of them inside the store, all spaced out across the room, and every single one of them was facing the front of the window, facing the street, facing me. At first I thought maybe they were employees doing inventory or something, but the way they were standing there looking normal. They weren't moving, not even a little, just standing there like mannequins, looking out through the glass. I slowed down without even realizing it. I couldn't help myself but stare back inside. None of them reacted. No one turned their head. No one blinked. They just stood there, watching. That was the moment I started feeling really uncomfortable. So I kept walking. But as I passed the next shop, I looked inside again. And the same thing was happening there. More people standing inside. Perfectly still, facing the windows. It felt like they were waiting for something or someone. I walked the rest of the way home pretty quickly after that. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were workers. Maybe it was some kind of late-night cleaning crew or something. But since that night, I've started noticing more little things that don't feel right. Sometimes when I drive past those stores late at night, the lights inside flicker like someone just turned them on, but the street outside is empty. Other things I see, like silhouettes moving inside. When I look closer, they stop moving. I've asked neighbors a few times about it. Most people either say they haven't noticed anything, or they just assume it's some kind of business they don't understand. But I can't shake the feeling that something about it isn't normal. Because even during the day, those stores still look the same. Lights on, shelves inside, no customers. No signs explaining what they sell, just quiet buildings with people occasionally standing inside, staring out the windows. I don't know what those places are, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but it's gotten to the point where I avoid walking down that street late at night. I guess I'm posting this here to see if anyone else has seen something like this before, or if anyone has any idea what those kinds of stores actually do, or could be, because the longer they stay open, the less normal it feels. Story 2. Something escaped from the test site. I've never really talked about this outside of a few close friends, mostly because every time I try to explain it, people assume I'm exaggerating or misremembering something. But I know what I saw that night, and the way everything was handled afterward makes it even harder to forget. When I was about 18, I lived with my parents in a small town outside Spokane in Washington State. Our house sat near the edge of town, and about 5 miles away there was a large fenced area that everyone just referred to as the test site. No one in town ever knew exactly what happened there. It was officially listed as some sort of military research and testing facility, but there were always rumors about it. People talked about strange lights out there at night, helicopters flying low over the woods, and occasionally loud sounds that echoed across the hills. Most of the time, we just ignored it. It had been there longer than most of people in town had lived there. Then, one night, something strange happened. It started with helicopters. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of several helicopters flying extremely low over the neighborhood. Not one or two, at least 3 or 4. I remember sitting up in bed and looking out the window. The lights from the helicopters were sweeping across the treetops, like they were searching for something. That by itself was unusual, but it was the strangest part. About 10 minutes later, the power in our house went out. The entire street went dark. No street lights, no porch lights, just darkness. At first I assumed it was a normal outage, but then I noticed something outside, in the distance, toward the direction of the test site. There were bright floodlights moving across the hills, like vehicles or search teams. At that point I started feeling uneasy, but eventually I lay back down and tried to sleep. That's when I noticed my bedroom door was open. I was certain I had closed it before going to bed. Our hallway light was always on, which meant a faint yellow glow was coming into my room. And in that light, I could see something standing in the corner of the room. At first, my brain tried to explain it away. I thought maybe it was just a shadow from the window or something. But the more I looked at it, the more wrong it felt. It was shaped like a person, tall, too tall, actually. And the strangest thing was that it was just a shadow on the wall. It looked like something darker than the rest of the room, like a silhouette that had depth. It was just standing there, perfectly still. I remember my heart starting to race because I couldn't understand what I was looking at. For a moment, I thought someone had actually broken into the house, but the shape didn't look like a normal person. It was thin, almost stretched, and it seemed wrong somehow. I closed my eyes for a second, thinking maybe I was half asleep or imagining it, but when I opened them again, the shape was still there, except it wasn't in the same corner anymore. It was closer to bed. Not much closer, but closer. That was the moment panic really set in. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The moment the light hit that part of the room, the shape disappeared. Not slowly, not like someone moving away, just gone. The corner of the room was completely empty. I sat there for a long time after that, trying to calm down and convince myself it had been some kind of trick of the light. Eventually, the power came back on, and then the helicopters were gone. The next morning, the entire town was talking about what happened during the night. A lot of people had heard the helicopters. Some people say their military trucks were driving towards the test site. Later that day, the local news reported that there had been a minor equipment malfunction during the test exercise at the facility. That was the official explanation. No details, no questions. Just a short statement saying everything had been contained and there was no damage to the public. Most people seemed satisfied with that, but I wasn't, because that night something had been standing in my room, and a few days later something else happened that made it even harder to ignore. I was sitting in the living room when my dad turned on the news. There was another report about the test site. This time, they said that there had been a contaminated failure involving experimental equipment, but that it had been resolved quickly. While the reporter was talking, they showed footage of the facility. Tall fences, armed guards, floodlights. But what caught my attention was something the reporter said at the end. They mentioned that their equipment involved an incident that was described as optical camouflage testing technology, something designed to manipulate lights and shadows. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe my brain just filled in the blanks that night. But I still remember exactly what I saw standing in the corner of my room. And it didn't look like camouflage. It looked like something that wasn't supposed to be there. And whatever it was, it definitely wasn't just a shadow. Story 3. The Man Who Walks Our Streets at Night. This is something that happened when I was around 15, and for a long time I assumed it was just some creepy neighborhood rumor. But after what we saw that night, I'm not so sure anymore. I grew up in a pretty normal suburban neighborhood. Quiet streets, small houses, families, kids riding bikes during the day. But there was always one strange story people talked about. Parents would sometimes mention it as a joke when kids stayed out too long. They'd say something like, "Better get home before the night walker comes around." Most of us assumed it was just some dumb urban legends adults used to scare kids. According to the story, there was a man who walked through the neighborhood every single night around 3 in the morning. No one knew where he came from, no one knew where he went, but people claimed he always followed the same route, slowly walking down the streets and stopping in front of certain houses, checking doors, looking through windows. Again, most of us thought it was just a creepy story, until the night we actually saw him. It was during a sleepover at my friend Tyler's house. There was 4 of us there, and we stayed up way later than we were supposed to. At some point someone brought up that story about the man who walks the neighborhood at night. Tyler said his older brother had claimed to see him once. Of course we didn't believe it, but someone jokingly suggested we stay awake until 3 in the morning to see if the guy actually shows up. So that's what we did. Around 2:45 we turned off the lights in Tyler's room and sat by the window that faced the street. At first nothing happened. The neighborhood was completely quiet. No cars, no people, just streetlights and empty houses. Then a few minutes after 3 we saw someone walking down the sidewalk. At first I thought it was just someone out for a late walk, but something about the way he moved felt wrong. He walked very slowly, almost like he wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. As he reached the first house on the street, he stopped. Then he walked up to the front door. He didn't knock, he didn't ring the doorbell, he just stood there for a moment. Then he leaned slightly towards the window next door, like he was looking inside. After a few seconds, he stepped back onto the sidewalk and continued. That's when all of us started feeling uneasy, because he did the exact same thing at the next house, and the one after that, stopping, looking at the door, then leaning toward the windows. The street was silent, except for the sounds of his footsteps. Eventually, he reached Tyler's house. For the first time that night, he stopped longer than usual. He stood on the sidewalk directly in front of the house. Then he slowly turned his head and looked up towards Tyler's bedroom window, toward us. Even though the lights were off and we were sitting back from the glass, it felt like he could see us perfectly. None of us moved. None of us said anything. We just sat there, frozen, while this man stared up at the house. After what felt like forever, he finally turned away and continued walking down the street. Eventually, he disappeared around the corner. None of us slept that night. The next morning, we told Tyler's parents about what we've seen. They didn't really take it seriously. They assumed it was just someone walking home, or maybe checking houses. But a few weeks later, something happened that made the whole thing feel much worse. My parents were watching the news one evening when there was a report about a missing person. A man from a nearby neighborhood had disappeared during the night. The last time anyone saw him was when he left his house late in the evening to take a walk. As the report continued, they showed a list of other missing persons from a surrounding area. Most of them had disappeared over the last 10 or 15 years. A strange pattern started to appear. Almost all of them had been last seen leaving their homes late at night, sometimes to walk, sometimes after someone knocked on their door, sometimes after neighbors reported seeing a man walking through the neighborhood. After that report aired, I started noticing something else. Every once in a while, new missing person poster would appear around town. Different names, different ages, but almost always the same detail. Last seen, late at night, leaving their house. And every time I see one of those posters, I think back to that night at Tyler's house, because I can still picture the man standing in the street, looking up at us, and checking every house like he was deciding something, like he was choosing. And the worst part is, no one in the neighborhood ever talks about the night walker anymore. but every once in a while, when I'm awake late enough, I still find myself looking out the window, just to make sure he isn't walking down the street again. Those were 3 disturbing stories that began in ordinary neighborhoods and slowly turned into something much stranger. If you enjoy unsettling encounters like these, consider subscribing for more creepy stories. And if anyone you've ever experienced something strange in your own neighborhood, feel free to share it in the comments. Until next time, stay safe out there.